Ours anyways, you know. Yeah, let's kick it off. Livestream Friday. Let's do this. My good pal.
It was going the whole time?
Drew Spanning. It was going the whole time.
Perfect.
Thank you for hanging out once again with
absolutely.
me. I always appreciate we get to sit down and shoot the breeze a little bit. But there's so many things we always can talk about.
Especially right now. We were just saying that. We're like, look at everything happening, converging at one time.
Yeah. I can't keep track, right? It's
impossible.
It's almost overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I know some people legitimately do get overwhelmed by what they read in the news, and you probably need to unplug a little bit. But there's so much going on. I've been following some Supreme Court cases as I kind of have been. And a big one that actually was heard oral arguments, maybe Wednesday last week, was a case called it's revolving around the Chevron deference.
Okay.
And
what is that? I don't know what that is.
So the Chevron deference, it's a case with Chevron, the
big oil company.
Yeah. I'd have to look it up, but I think maybe in the 80s, there was a case before the Supreme Court, and basically what it was, the end result was the Chevron deference means when a state agency is involved. In their case, I believe it was maybe the EPA or something like that.
Yeah.
It was imposing some restrictions on them. The Chevron deference means that when a state agency, a la the EPA, the Health Department, Liquor Commission, Michigan Department of Civil Rights, or, for example, Customs and Border Protection, when those agencies are being sued or a rule or law that involves that state agency is in question, deference should be given to the state agency and the rule as it was written, basically saying that the rule was written in good faith.
Got it.
Right? Yeah. And that single ruling, in my opinion, and many, many other much smarter people than me, believe that that is how the fourth branch, the administrative state, has grown exponentially in the last 40 to 50 years.
That was the vehicle.
That was the vehicle that said these agencies, we're going to give deference to them.
So preference, they can't really get in trouble.
They can, but so imagine the scales of justice.
Yeah.
The deference, the Chevron deference, basically allows a judge to put their finger on the scale in favor of the state agency, and then work your way back from there. Wow. That's what we had to do in the administrative law proceedings here in Michigan. We had to fight our way through in order to get to a constitutional question, and ultimately had it severed from law.
Yeah. So what's happening then with that? What would happen if that's overturned?
So, and you can see signals from this from Gorsuch and the other conservatives on the court, and not just in this case, but an EPA ruling, the Mayorkas ruling, which was a Customs and Border Protection ruling last year. They are saying this administrative state is too big, too broad, powerful, has way too much power. Looking what the EPA is doing. Look at what the health department tried to do. They tried to force jabs and we're actually quite
very successful.
And this isn't a knock on jabs. This is more about the power that they had access to and then used.
I'll knock on jabs.
And I'm not a proponent, listen. But that's the vehicle that they used. The Chevron deference basically was used to say they do have the permission to do this. And it's on you to now question whether or not they really do. And you're going to have a hard time getting a judge to steer away from that Chevron deference. And this is the first real linchpin, in my opinion, to destroying these bloated government agencies. And I think that was the majority we were talking before. I did not watch the State of the State address last night.
Yeah, you were saying
Whitmer.
That. I didn't even know what was going on. That's how bad I am.
Well, they're nonsensical to begin with, anyways, because it's just like a State of the Union address from the president. It's a bunch of malarkey that they hope to get done, and 90% of it probably won't anyway, especially in the bipolar political world that we have these days, anyways. But I got asked the other day. There's crazy stuff happening here in Michigan with the Republican party, the state party, I was asked if I would ever consider running for public office. This is not the first time I was asked, but I was asked on the radio.
This is an interesting question.
I was asked on the radio.
Where were you being interviewed?
So Trucker Randy.
Trucker Randy.
Yep. And David Jima, who is a former state rep, I believe, was more or less inquiring about, why I'm not getting.
Why don't you run?
And I just basically said, I like what I do now. And I love running a restaurant. It's a difficult climate to work in. It's always a challenge.
Yeah.
But I don't like politics. I don't like the political atmosphere. And what I told Randy was I'd have to pick a team. And I don't think that this cycle would necessarily be a good idea if I were even to think about doing it. My joke always is nobody wants me representing them. Come to find out that may not be entirely true. But
no, I don't think
I might be a little bit too outspoken and a little too honest. Maybe to be in politics, but maybe it's Aristotle that said something to the effect of those who choose not to be involved in politics end up being ruled by lesser men. Something to that effect. The penalty for not being involved in politics is being ruled by lesser men. Actually, I think is how it goes. And I can't turn away from that. That's a tough reality to look at. But you were talking about RFK.
Yeah.
RFK Jr. And
I like him.
And what's happening with
he can't win, right? Statistically,
Trump is now the presumptive nominee.
Yeah, of course it's going to be Trump.
And Nikki Haley seems to think that she's going to hold on and can potentially overtake that.
No, I think whether that's a smokescreen or she's just doing it for her own popularity contest.
What I am hearing is that there is a large swath of people that do not want to vote for a geriatric.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be an ageist when I say that, but when you look at other candidates, and you look at
how old's Kennedy?
That's a good question. I believe he's in his mid-60s.
Okay.
So the other two are going to be 80s.
80s?
By the time it comes around.
Oh my gosh.
Trump, I think, is a few years behind Biden. And you kind of have to wonder, is this the best that we have to put forward? And that's not necessarily always the case, I think, but RFK bringing this independent run in, I'm hoping can potentially change the political landscape to where we're not thinking about red and blue.
I know.
We're thinking, red, blue, purple. Maybe.
Yeah. Red, white, and blue.
I would love to see the Libertarian Party get their act together and put together a coherent strategy and a money machine to back some candidates, but I have a feeling that the independent way is going to be that.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there's any money behind independence either. Going back and saying I've been watching some of the Supreme Court stuff. We got these I haven't really read the rulings, but there is basically an emergency order that SCOTUS put out saying that Governor Abbott in Texas has to remove the razor wire in the park.
Protecting himself.
Right. They have till, what is it? Maybe today, I think, to remove that. And it's created a constitutional crisis, as they want to call it. Because, you have the federal government and you have the state government. And this is where you're going to see statists versus federalists. And
so if somebody if somebody listening, so set the stage for the legal battle here. What is it legally that is happening?
So what's happening is Governor Abbott of Texas is taking it upon himself to bring in the Texas National Guard, and they're putting up razor wire in a park where they're having a ton of
illegals coming through.
Illegals, migrants, whatever the unhoused migrant, whatever the fuck you want to call them these days, who gives a shit? They're people that are coming over the border.
That are supposed to come in.
An international or transnational border, whatever the hell you want to call it.
Yep.
An imaginary line. They're crossing over.
Yep.
We have a legal way to come into this country. They're choosing not to do that.
Of course.
Right. It's a pretty simple issue.
Very simple.
Put something in the way.
Yep.
Use the door. Yep. Don't climb in through the window.
Yep.
And then get a bus ticket or get a
every
this or get
single
that
person will do it that way if that's available.
Yeah.
Even good people and bad people. Everybody just will do that. It's easier.
So what's happening is so the Biden administration filed a lawsuit.
Real quick, help me understand this. What was the justification from the Biden administration to just open the border indefinitely and let everybody in, besides us from like would be considered a conspiracy theory, like literally wanting millions of illegals in order to participate within that agenda? Okay, so let's say that's like the conspiracy theory, which there's probably a lot of truth to it. Okay, but what was the actual justification of saying no, we want open borders?
I didn't read the briefs, but my understanding is twofold. One is that the federal government has the right to secure or more or less unsecure the border. The other part of it is that it's a humanitarian crisis.
So a humanitarian crisis so we need to allow people to come here?
Right, because the razor wire is dangerous. And
so because they're going to try to get over it.
The other part of it is that where they place the razor wire is actually inside the border. It's not at the border. So you actually cross the imaginary line and then you encounter the razor wire. So that is another portion of their argument, is that this is not necessarily razor wire at the border.
It was probably easier to get it up there. They're just essentially giving up a little land.
Geographically, that's the word I'm trying to get. This park and the river and everything, the way that it works out, this particular park just happens to be a funnel. Yeah. Which makes an easy spot for the Texas National Guard to put up the razor wire.
I can't imagine that.
In order to keep people away from that park and that
do we have problems up? Do we have problems up here in Michigan?
My understanding is
like are people invading from Canada?
I don't think so. Well, okay, so it depends on who you ask. You get some conspiracy theorists, and they will tell you that there is. I mean, that border is probably much easier to cross.
Well, yeah, we have a lot of water.
Yes.
And bridges.
Yes. The difference being is that
got like a moat.
Central and South America is where the foreign migrants are coming from, and then travel. I mean, there's literally a trail, I believe, through South and Central America right up.
Yeah.
And we know that these people are coming and have been coming, and at record numbers is my understanding.
It's amazing.
And the governor, I mean, it would be kind of like, Gretchen Whitmer saying, we're going to close off a portion of the tunnel down near Windsor because the migrants are illegally crossing through the tunnel somehow.
Yeah.
Like the Ninja Turtles. I don't know. I think the real issue is that there are more coming from the south than they are the north.
Yeah.
But it would seem that the northern border would be much easier to cross.
Yeah. I found our weak point. You got to hop over from Cockburn Island to Drummond Island.
Yeah.
That's it right there. Yeah. No one's going to suspect it. We can just funnel a bunch of bad people that way. Get the ice bridge, get enough cold days, make it happen. No, yeah, we don't deal with these issues.
I think
we got a lot of water.
This is so. Going back to Trump really quick, when you look at the makeup of the court, not necessarily in the Texas decision, but I believe in the Chevron case that was heard, you're really going to see the Trump appointee shine. Now, I think that they let down a lot of people the other day with the Texas ruling.
Big letdown, right?
I believe that was maybe a 5-4 ruling. And I think Barrett and
flipped.
Roberts.
I don't remember the other one.
I think they both kind of flipped. and I didn't read.
That was the razor wire. That was the one we're talking about. Yeah.
And I have a feeling. So again, now what that was is basically saying, in the meantime, until the case gets heard, they need to remove the razor wire. So they weren't necessarily saying they couldn't. They were, so the Biden administration was basically asking for a stay, more or less, or a temporary restraining order to have them remove the razor wire until the Supremes could actually hear the briefing and the oral arguments.
So my timeout to that though is why besides the theory of we just want as many people to come into our country as possible, what is the justification from the Biden administration to say, you know what, Texas, we don't like this idea of making it harder for people to get in? What is the actual justification for that?
I think that it is to assert the federal government's power over the border.
Okay. Oh, so the border's run by federal. The states have no control. Like, that's it.
That is the constitutional question.
Yeah.
And that, I believe.
And where the states been like, they're just defending themselves.
If I were to read you Governor Abbott's response to having to remove the razor wire, it reads like something that James Madison might have written.
Wow.
It reads, you could replace the words immigration with slavery. And it would be as impactful as that period of time.
This is a big deal.
This is a really big deal. Really well. And it could almost be used as a document I should say, the pretext for secession.
Yeah.
From the Union.
Holy smokes.
And I certainly am not advocating for that, but they do have the right to secede from the Union, right? We're all voluntary participants
here
in the Union.
Yeah.
And this could create a constitutional crisis to where, I don't think this will happen, to where Texas could become an independent nation state.
Yeah. It's its own place.
If the United States federal government is not willing to protect its residents and its border along Texas,
they have the right to pull.
Texas has to and has the constitutional obligation via their state constitution to protect their citizens and protect their border. Now, what that means exactly is what those words say in their state constitution.
Yeah.
But Governor Abbott believes that that state constitution takes precedence over the federal constitution, and the Biden administration disagrees.
Fascinating.
It is fascinating. And this is why Trump getting, 3 appointees?
Yeah.
Now, you can disagree with how he did it, holding off on one or doing whatever, or, of course, who he nominated. But I believe in the Chevron case, which will have impacts on this border.
So tying the Chevron. So help me. How does the Chevron and this have impact? Because it's the way the border crisis is happening is from a government agency,
right?
Correct?
Correct.
And so because of that, I get it now. The Chevron case would lower the high water mark, so to speak, that somebody has to get to in order to question a government agency.
Right.
Or their power gets dwindled.
Deploying federal troops on a state's border. I don't know. Has that ever been done? I don't know. Usually it's their National Guard, right? Those are the constitutional questions. So, okay, and then you have to look at other agencies that are going to be employed in something like this. ATF? Well, they have a terrible track record, right? The FBI? The FBI is already down there and already involved.
Wow.
You think they're not, I'm hoping, paying attention to some of these people that are coming over? I mean, so there are several government executive branch agencies that have the use of the Chevron deference in their holster. And if that can go down to where we balance the scales again, that is going to be huge. It's going to be huge for a number of reasons. The environmental stuff, election integrity stuff.
Yep.
I mean, it's a big
when does that case get heard?
The Chevron?
Yeah. What's the status of that?
They had
an
oral argument on that last week, I believe, Wednesday. So
because that's really not in the news at the time. I mean, I haven't seen it.
It's not mainstream. It's not because
again,
it takes a little bit of explaining.
People that are hearing it on this podcast probably have not heard it.
Probably not. And again, this is a failure of mainstream news and media. There are some people that are talking about it, but those that understand exactly the implications and or want to, how do I want to say it? Not destroy, but definitely lessen the influence of executive branch agencies. I mean, everybody knows it. The IRS. Give me a break.
Especially now. There
are, I mean, here in Michigan, I think we're one department away from the governor's constitutional limit on executive branch agencies. She peeled off 2 more this year. A second education department. We have 2 education departments.
We have 2 education.
We have 2 education departments. Yeah.
What does the second one do?
Apparently come up with great ideas like 2 years of free
life.
Yeah, I got to use air quotes. Free post-secondary education. Yeah, community college.
So the post-secondary.
Yep. And I do believe there's some free kindergarten stuff in there. The free lunches. Sorry, taxpayer funded lunches.
Yeah, like the pre-K stuff too.
Yeah. Tuition.
Where did the free lunches things come from? Why does every kid get a free lunch? I don't get that. Like that feels. It's such a small percentage of kids.
This could be its own podcast.
Like it's a micro percentage of kids that don't exist in a system that can get them a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. If you're going to have
the conversation, what you need to know to begin with, when you're talking about free school lunches or taxpayer-funded lunches,
taxpayer-funded lunches.
The thing to know from the beginning of that conversation is no child is refused a meal.
Yeah.
At any public school in Michigan,
they
cannot be refused. So what happens, or what had been happening up until this legislation was passed, and it's not even permanent, by the way, is a student comes in, gets a lunch. It goes onto their account. If they cannot pay for it, it goes onto their account. Now, those accounts will run in the negative in perpetuity.
Okay.
And the reason why I know this is because we did a fundraiser.
I remember that.
Just like over a year. It was about this time last year. Over $11,000 was the Gaylord Community Schools student lunch debt. So when Andrew Jr. goes in and gets his breakfast or his lunch and doesn't have the money to buy his lunch, it goes in his account.
Got it.
Day after day, they can run that tab up. They're not denied services. They're not sent a bill at the end of the school year. Nothing like that.
Yeah.
It basically gets written off.
Wow.
What we did last year was, before this legislation was passed, actually about 4 months, myself and another business owner here in town, Kevin Johnson from Johnson's Propane, we did a fundraiser in order to pay off that $11,284 in student lunch debt. They passed legislation that now basically says everybody gets a taxpayer-funded lunch. The problem with this that I find is, first, no students were ever being denied lunch. That would be...
So what's the need?
You would be solving a problem. Correct. What is the need? In my opinion, it's a political platform to stand on.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is.
And also, it's a political dagger to use. Because if I sit here and say, why are we paying for student lunch debt or for student lunches? If I'm a Democrat, I can simply sit there and say, what is your problem with giving students food?
Wow.
You must want students to go hungry then, don't you? See how that works?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm in favor
Which
of
is really hard to argue.
Free student lunch. It's very hard to argue. But that's why you have to start the conversation with, those kids were never being denied service
Exactly.
or food in the beginning. What's happening now is we're potentially, and I don't know that the data has come through on this, we're potentially funding lunches for students that can afford them.
That's exactly what's happening.
In my opinion, that's what's happening.
I think every kid probably can afford them.
I'd like to have the conversation
because it goes
about
back
the nutritional value of those lunches.
What?
And then I'd like to have, and then I'd like to have the conversation about.
There is no nutritional value.
About there, in some cases there is, but there is not necessarily a standard.
It's still fake,
right?
Though. It's still genetically modified everything.
But then let's talk about the movement away from the nuclear family and parents.
Yeah.
And I understand parents can't always give lunch and dinner to their kids. I understand that.
Most of the time they can, though.
But what we're now creating in the school environment is a clinic, mental health, physical health, and now we're feeding your children.
It's the schools are the parents.
So, and we've seen this more and more, and I know the teachers feel this is why we're having record numbers of teachers that are retiring and getting out of. I mean, same with the police. The police,
and it's why private schools are going through the roof right now.
Absolutely, 100%.
Private Catholic schools have never been
more. It's while well intended,
maybe well intended.
I will default to well intended.
Sure,
right? I'll still default with masking and social distancing as well intended, right?
But if you go, here's my argument though. If you go up the line far enough, it was not well intended.
I can't disagree with that.
The articulation of it as it goes down and it spreads out. Okay, well intended. But that's like the sheep following the shepherd, right? That shepherd,
when you know
was
better,
not well intended.
And there's data sets and information that you are unwilling to even consider.
No. Hiding.
That's absolutely when it becomes the other.
Yes.
Yeah. And it ends up becoming propaganda.
Yes.
That you're then promoting instead of
which is why it's so important to have discussions like this. Because this actually affects all of us. Yeah. It affects us.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. These macro things that are happening have micro consequences. Absolutely 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, there are plenty of people here in Michigan that are not doing well financially.
No.
When you look at the cost of groceries specifically.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to point to gas. Gas is like this great big metric for how people are doing financially. Much. It's just not. You look at a gallon of milk, eggs are, chicken, all those little things.
Everybody is strapped.
But then you start putting all these other stupid things on top of it. All this crap that Whitmer wanted to proclaim last night as free is not free. It's taxpayer funded. My taxes are going to that.
Yeah.
And then we're facing a tax increase last year. I know the Mackinac Center for Public Policy is actually suing. And I think they've got a Michigan Supreme Court case to reverse a tax break that Whitmer allowed to expire, basically. Yeah, so I mean, our individual income tax will most likely go up next year, or is scheduled to go up next year. So yeah, I mean, you just have to look at all these things and be like, oh, hold on, wait a minute. This isn't free. We don't need electric buses. We don't need, 120 acres of solar farm on the other side of I-75 here in town.
Right.
These things are just stupid. Fix my road.
Yeah.
First.
Yeah. All right, so we need to wrap this up, but how about we both make some closing statements? Let's make some closing, because I feel like we need to pull all this together into something, because this has been a podcast that we really have gone on a lot of topics. However, there is a congruency to them. I really am fascinated by your Chevron case.
It is fascinating.
I really never knew anything about that until we started talking just now. That is so cool to learn. Had I been watching this podcast and just listened for that, I'd be like, I'm glad I listened to that. That's really cool to know.
Probably be doing a separate podcast on that.
That's a great idea.
If I can get...
Is there anybody you can get to interview?
Well, if I can get Dave Delaney, my attorney, to come in. Because so
sweet.
We've been talking about Chevron deference for almost 4 years.
Oh, kidding.
Because we've been battling these executive branch agencies. And they get the first crack at everything. I have to go through the ringer. And not every agency is. So Department of Civil Rights, you actually get to divert first and ask a constitutional question there. But not like DNR is not that way. Liquor Commission's not that way. MDARD is not that way. They're not. But civil rights is monumentally important. More so than, say, the Liquor Commission and all these other things, right? And First Amendment, freedom of speech, comes into play a lot with Department of Civil Rights than it does with the Liquor Commission.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or Health and Human Services.
Sure, I get that.
But people have been complaining for years and years how bloated the executive branch and all of these other agencies, Eagle here in Michigan, the Energy, Great Lakes, and whatever department, the DNR, all of these agencies that have this huge power, and especially with the DNR, they have police powers.
Yeah.
But all of them reside in the executive branch. And anybody, especially libertarians, that are looking for the remedy to all of this bloated government and how these crazy things have gotten so big and so bloated and wasting so much money. Our military, love them. But I'm telling you, there's a reason why our budget annually add up, I think, the next 10 or 12 countries combined meets our annual defense budget. It's crazy.
Amazing.
It's just crazy. That money we could be spending that could go so many different places.
Right.
People want to talk about free healthcare. We could easily fund free healthcare in this country if we stopped spending 1/10 on the federal budget. But this is how it starts. This is the first brick in the wall that needs to come out, is the overturning of the Chevron deference and getting that out of the way so we can hold these state agencies and federal agencies accountable.
I get it now. So this is your wrap up. Tell me though, because I want to know this. Where is this case at today, and where is it in the next 6 months?
So they heard oral arguments last week. Usually within 30 days, SCOTUS will publish their findings, their ruling.
Okay.
And by all accounts, it sounds like the conservatives on the panel were asking all the right questions, and I think that it's going to be overturned.
Wow.
And
it should be massive.
And in my peon opinion, sitting here in the basement, it should be.
It should be.
It should be.
It should be.
And that's how we hold them to account.
Yeah.
And that's how we then turn the legislature into the body that it should be, which is putting more detail instead of limit the gathering of people for any purpose and may establish procedures. They're going to have to refine that more for the Department of Health and Human Services. That's my take. So hopefully within the next month, we'll actually hear that Chevron has been overturned, and we can actually.
If that happens, I think this needs to be a centerpiece of what you're talking about.
Absolutely, because
that's huge.
Yeah,
so cool.
That's the way forward out of this.
Yeah, if there's one thing to take from this podcast, it's that.
Yeah,
that was brilliant. Wow, good job.
And I'll tell you, that's why it's been so hard to get a case back in front of SCOTUS, because it has huge implications, nationwide, absolutely,
across the board.
Because the Chevron deference is not only used at the federal level; it's used at the state level, right? Yeah. Same as the non-delegation principle, which is not really a thing, but it's been this principle that's been perpetuated for years, and that's going to come crashing down in the next year as well.
Yeah.
Because there is, according to Michigan's Constitution, no permissible delegation from one branch to the other. And that's what COVID was all about.
Yeah.
So,
dude, so good. Okay. I think my wrap up on it is this, because I always come, my background is a little different. but I'm fascinated by this stuff. But I love the question, because I have the same question. Well, what the heck can I do about it, right? What am I besides an observer? And I think it's so important to realize that everybody's life is incredibly meaningful, right? And I find a fascinating passage um, in the book of Genesis, where, and I've probably brought this up before, where Adam is created and he is given dominion over his garden, and his job is the garden that he was given. And oftentimes it's in a culture like we're in, unlike any other culture this world has ever seen, right? We literally have unlimited, infinite input. What I mean by that is, in a daily basis, you and I are being bombarded with literally thousands of messages, right? Thousands. To be a teenager growing up right now is just nuts. Think of your brain forming in this culture. It's crazy, right? So how do you combat that? Because literally we've lived a certain way for thousands of years, mentally. And now all of a sudden over the last 20, as the internet's jumped in, we've literally done rocket from an information standpoint. Shout out to Claude Shannon, right? Father of the information age, Gaylord resident and native. What is the antidote for that? Okay, what is the antidote for that to bring a sense of purpose, a sense of meaningfulness into your life? Okay, and it really is as simple as this. When you wake up and you look in front of you as to what you have, what's your garden? And you might think, well, Drew, my garden's really small. It's like an herb garden. Awesome. Make it the best freaking herb garden there is. This whole concept, like, oh, I've got to be in politics, or I've got to own this, or I've got to be like this to have impact or influence or any type of significance whatsoever, is completely false. And oftentimes, most people, including myself, feel like, does God even really notice me? Like, is my existence even that important, or I'm just taking up airspace? I'll tell you this. Yes, you are taking up airspace if your story is basically just a conglomerate of everybody else's story and you're living through them, right? If it's the news and this and this and this and that makes up your story, well then yeah, it is just airspace, right? Mm-hmm. All these things, and a lot of the things what I love about talking with you that we talk about affects all of us in some capacity. It's in our, what I call dominion. That, oh, that does affect my dominion. Yeah, it's important for me to know that, to interact with it, right? I say all this, my encouragement as we talk about all these things is actually to simplify and go, okay, I want to know about all this, but what am I going to do today to further advance the garden I have, right? Even if it's just a little herb garden. Mm-hmm. What am I doing to tend to it, to make it great, to be a part of it, to think about it, obsessively even? Sure. Right? Yeah. Like we are with the Lions right now, right? Obsessively. Like everybody's in such a good mood right now. Why? Oh my gosh, the Lions are going to go to the Super Bowl. They're going. I think I'm calling it right now. I'm making the call. Lions are going to the Super Bowl. But think of how amazing our life is that we get to live. That I even think about the wonder and awe of the human body, the universe, and everything in. Like we're here right now. It's unreal, right? So that's my end to this is be like, dude, the Chevron thing, huge deal, massive. Like kudos to you for being so far ahead of that and what that's going to do and explaining this, like so cool. And then from my little input, I'd say, remember anybody listening to this, tend to your garden. Tend to your garden. Tend to your garden. You cannot go wrong with that. Yeah. You will always win when you do that. Anyway. 1% better a day. Love it. Good talking as always.
Thanks, buddy. I always appreciate your point of view on everything.
Thank you.
You're so much smarter than I am. I appreciate it. I always appreciate you guys hanging out with us here. Fuelcast TV, Risk It for the Brisket. Go to fuelcasttv.com for all of our episodes. We're on YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, anywhere you find or listen to your podcast.
Subscribe to
Check us out. Yeah. We're working on some new shorts for a lot of this stuff too. So leave some comments. Be sure to subscribe. Check out the shorts for this and all of our other podcasts. Drew, thank you as always.
Of course.
Thank you guys, and we'll see you soon.